The stories told on this channel aim to explore the human mind at its darkest. This is a narrative told from the perspective of the perpetrator. There is no glorification here, only the unease of realizing that evil can have a voice, a shape, and an address. I've never been one to talk loudly in hallways or seek out company in the dining hall. Maybe that's why no one thought twice when I started spending more time alone, between the library and the shadows of the old psychology building. I've always preferred silence, not the comfortable kind, but the heavy, dense silence where even the sound of your own footsteps feels like a secret. It's in that kind of silence that certain decisions are born, half by accident, half by choice. And from the start of that semester, I knew that someone, someday, would see who I really was, even if I never said a word. Her name was Dr. Elise Granger. She must have been in her mid-40s, but she had that kind of presence that made you feel completely exposed, like she could see everything you worked to bury. I started seeing her after my advisor suggested it, following a minor outburst during a sociology class. At our first session, she just stared at me for a few seconds before speaking. "You're not angry," she said. "You're afraid of looking weak." The room was cold that day, but my hands immediately started sweating. That's when I realized she wasn't like the others. She was too precise. Every silence of hers felt like a mirror. And I, someone who always controlled words like a blade, started stumbling over them in front of her. Elise took notes constantly. Sometimes she'd just look at me and write something down with a neutral expression, like she'd spotted a fracture I didn't know was there. I started wondering what she was writing about me. I started hearing my own voice echo down empty halls. That's when I knew she wasn't just my therapist. She was a threat, because she saw me, and no one else could. I remember the basement in my grandmother's house. I must have been 8. She said she was leaving me there just for a few minutes, whenever she needed a breather. But minutes turned into hours. I could hear the TV upstairs, her laughter, while I counted the cracks in the concrete walls. I never cried. I thought that if I stayed quiet enough, invisible enough, she'd let me out sooner. That was the first time I learned that being seen could be dangerous, and that sometimes people only like you as long as they don't really know you. I started showing up early to sessions. Sometimes I'd sit on the bench outside her office just to watch her prep her notes, writing by hand, glasses slipping down her nose. Once she left the door cracked open while seeing another student. I sat nearby, pretending to read, but I listened to everything. He cried. She was gentle, used the same words she used with me. That bothered me in a way I didn't understand then. I began wondering if she said the same things to everyone, if it was all just a script. That thought ate at me, and that's when I decided I had to know exactly what she was writing about me. The following Friday, I waited behind the second-floor water fountain until everyone left. The psychology building locked up at 6, but I already knew the back door latch didn't shut properly. I'd tested it weeks before. When I stepped into her office, the air still carried her perfume, lavender with a sharp metallic undertone. I sat in the same chair I always used and stared at hers. It looked smaller, less impressive without her in it. I opened the bottom drawer, empty, then the top one. A brown notebook with a strap, filled with handwritten pages. My name wasn't mentioned directly, but I saw myself between the lines. Distorted need for control. Strategic empathy. I closed the notebook. I felt something I couldn't name. Not anger, anticipation, and maybe fear. Fear of what else she might have figured out. At the next session, she was different, more direct, less silent. Her questions were short, her eyes less steady. I don't know if she noticed something missing, or if she just felt it, but something had changed. At the end, she told me she thought it was time to wrap things up, that I could continue with another therapist if I wanted. She smiled, like it was my decision, but I knew what she was doing. She was pulling away, cutting access, and what scared me wasn't losing her help, it was what she'd take with her, the notes, the insight, the version of me she had built, a version that, if ever spoken aloud, could ruin everything I had spent years constructing. Senior year of high school, we had a group project on behavioral theory. I did all the work myself, not because I thought I was better, but because I didn't trust anyone. The slides were perfect. I printed summaries for the teacher, practiced every line. But I submitted it without the other students' names. I wanted the credit, and I didn't regret it. Not until the teacher called me out in front of the class. He asked, "Where's the rest of the group?" Then he smiled, the kind of smile adults use when they want to shame you slowly. It's a brilliant project, strategically structured, but what impresses me most is the calculation behind it. Then, louder. "You're brilliant, yes, but brilliant like someone dangerous." They laughed. First the insecure ones, then the rest. The next day, someone wrote "psychopath" on my locker in red marker. It stayed there for weeks. The teacher saw it. No one erased it. I remember the sound of my own footsteps down that hallway, the smell of floor cleaner, the shame in my voice during future presentations. People didn't avoid me because they were scared. They avoided me because they were disgusted, like they sensed I saw too much. And that's when I learned, never show people who you really are. Smile. Sit in the back. Be helpful. Never intimate. I became the perfect student, the one professors recommend, the classmates ask for notes. I shaped every word, every move, until I met Dr. Granger. Within a few sessions, she started peeling all that away, not with force, but with calm. And now she wanted to leave, to walk away with a version of me I wasn't ready to confront, and I couldn't allow that. That Thursday, I arrived at the building 2 hours early, pretended to study on the second floor of the library where I could see who walked into the psych department. When I saw her arrive, that burgundy coat, leather folder balanced in her arms, my body reacted before my thoughts did. The hallway's lights flickered, a faulty circuit I'd noticed for weeks. I waited until she was in her office, until the secretary left and the building went quiet. Then I walked calmly. My steps were muffled by the carpet. The door was unlocked. She smiled when she saw me, gently, and for a moment, I almost hesitated. "You look tired today," she said, crossing her legs, notebook in hand. I sat slowly, scanning the room, the amber lamp, the faint scent of lavender and old paint, the soft creak of her chair. I didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then I leaned forward. "Are you going to keep what you know about me to yourself?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't look surprised. "What do you think I know?" she said. I laughed, quietly, because she knew everything. The basement, the humiliation, the version of myself I had constructed to survive. And yet, she stayed calm, like she thought understanding me made her safe, like empathy was enough. That belief, that mistake, was what killed her, long before I did. While she wrote something, maybe a closing note, some therapeutic conclusion, I stood, walked slowly behind her, like I was heading to the bookshelf. The room was warm, but my hands were cold. She kept writing, used to my silent pauses. I placed a hand on the back of her chair. "Have you ever destroyed someone from the inside just with words?" I asked. She turned, calm expression, slight frown, trying to interpret the weight behind what I said. "Why? Do you feel that way?" she asked, like she still had time. Then I pushed her. Not in anger, not in panic,
with precision. Her body hit the corner of the bookshelf with a flat, hollow sound, bone against wood. Then silence again, thick, absolute. She slid to the floor, her eyes blinking in slow confusion, her mouth slightly open, like she wanted to speak but no words came. Just shock and maybe disappointment. I knelt beside her, watched the blood trail down from her head, soaking into the fibers of the rug like ink. I reached out, gently, and closed her eyes with 2 fingers. Not out of compassion, but to stop her from looking back. Then calmly, too calmly, I slipped the notebook into my backpack, took a tissue from her desk and wiped my prints from the chair. The lamp had tipped over, casting a diagonal glow across the floor. The room felt smaller now, still. I left through the back exit as the rain started. I didn't run, I didn't shake. No one saw me. The following week, the campus bulletin boards displayed a simple flyer with her photo. Missing since Thursday. Printed in black and white, like urgency could fit on a letter-sized sheet. I overheard people whispering in the dining hall. Maybe she went on a trip. She kept saying she needed a break. Others guessed she had a breakdown, some kind of crisis. No one mentioned foul play. No one dared. It was easier to believe she'd just gotten tired and left without warning. The truth is, she never left. I left her body in the space between the back of the archives and the old project lab, a decommissioned room filled with dusty shelves and moisture. I knew that place from my first semester when I interned in campus admin. I knew where the cameras were dead, where the janitor never checked, and where, if something went missing, no one would notice for months. I hid her notebook in a donation box in the library, tucked into an old Freud book nobody had touched in years, marked it with a blue sticker, just in case. But no one ever looked for it. What struck me most was how easily she vanished from the school's rhythm. A new counselor was hired 2 months later, younger, more clinical, far less perceptive. The sessions turned procedural. I kept my name clean, submitted papers, led a study group on academic ethics, got public praise from the department head. When her name came up, some people furrowed their brows, trying to remember her face, but it was like she had already been erased. And that told me everything I needed to know about a world where truth only matters if it's convenient. Sometimes I walk past room 214. It's still locked, the frosted glass fogged from the inside, a chain looped through the door handle. But the scent remains, lavender mixed with old paint and stale dust. No one talks about Dr. Elise anymore. Time filled the space she left with new names, new schedules, new concerns. I watch it all from a distance. The same worried faces pass through the halls, clutching folders, wearing practiced smiles, hiding invisible wounds. And I wonder, how many other secrets are being handed to the wrong people? These days, when people ask if I've ever done therapy, I say yes, and it changed my life. I mean it. She helped me understand my limits and what happens when someone gets too close to them. She taught me that some versions of ourselves are too dangerous to exist inside another person's mind, especially when that person has the courage to see us fully. And in the end, that's always how it is. It's not the screams that give the monster away. It's the silence afterward.
I used to say that every kind of pain, when properly lit, becomes art, and no one questioned it. In my second semester at Brightmoor School of the Arts, a professor called me a promise of observational cinema. I received an honorable mention for a short film that was basically my roommate crying in the bathroom. They said the authenticity was brutal, that I had captured the invisible.
What no one asked was why she was crying, or who pressed record before the first tear fell. The first time I realized the power of a camera, I was 9. My dad was yelling at my mom down the hallway, and for some reason I still can't explain, I picked up his old cell phone and aimed it at the cracked open door. The sound was muffled, but the faces, they were all there. Raw, shameful, real. And for a moment, watching it alone afterward, the chaos felt like it had meaning. It was like everything became bearable because someone saw, because someone filmed it. Harper moved into the dorm at the end of September, dragging 2 small suitcases and a cardboard box filled with poetry books, a portable humidifier, and homemade cookies. She was the kind of person who apologized when you bumped into her and smiled anyway. Shy, but never bitter. She taped family photos to the mirror, left good morning notes on our mugs, and wore fuzzy animal socks even on warm days. Sometimes she'd leave the radio playing at low volume just so the room wouldn't feel empty. She was soft and predictable, genuine, and because of that, transparent. I knew she wouldn't last long, but that's exactly what makes someone filmable, not what they reveal, but what leaks. With Harper, it started as a test, a minor tweak in her routine. I hid one of her necklaces for 2 days, then placed it back exactly where she remembered leaving it. I waited. On the 3rd day, she told me she was starting to feel distracted, forgetful. She gave a shy little laugh. I asked her to say that again on camera for a character study, I said. She agreed. Most people do when you ask gently, when you sound like you know what you're doing, and I always sound like I do. After that, it got easy. I started altering tiny variables, turning off the bathroom light while she showered, leaving her closet door slightly ajar, changing her alarm sound to eerie ambient noise, always subtle, always unprovable. She started sleeping poorly, forgetting common words, missing her morning classes. And every time it happened, I documented it. Not with a cinema camera, but with a body cam hidden in one of the fake books on my shelf. She had no idea, of course not. But the truth is, no one ever knows they're being directed, not until it's far too late. People think art is about aesthetics, but it's not. Real art is about discomfort, about catching someone in a moment of complete vulnerability and freezing it in time. At the end of November, the experimental documentary professor called me up in front of the class. He said that he had never seen someone film everyday life with such latent tension, that my frames suggested some kind of invisible violence. He told me, "You're crafting a work about what's left unsaid." He almost was moved. The class applauded. A girl even asked me how I created such an intimate and unsettling atmosphere. I smiled, said it was all about connecting with your subject. But inside I was thinking, and she doesn't even know the film already started. It wasn't until December that Harper began looking at me differently, not with anger, with caution, like she was trying to trace a crack on a wall she used to trust. Nothing direct, never is, but I noticed how she hesitated before speaking, how she started locking her diary tighter, how she began using the hallway bathroom instead of the one in our room. Subtle shifts. She stayed longer at the library, avoided the dorm mirror, even stopped playing her radio like silence might protect her. One night, while brushing her teeth, she looked at me through the bathroom mirror and whispered, "Have you been touching my stuff?" I laughed. Not mockingly. It was a small, soft laugh, almost conspiratorial. I gently touched her shoulder and said, "You okay? You're sounding kind of paranoid, girl." She smiled, but it was too quick, too thin, the kind of smile that comes with a flicker of doubt in the eyes. And in that second, I knew she was beginning to feel exactly what I needed her to feel. It was beautiful. So honest. From that point on, everything Harper did felt like it had been written by me. If she cried in the bathroom, it was because I'd played a recording of a violent argument in our room just before she got back from class. If she woke up in the middle of the night, it was because I set the hallway light to flicker at 3 a.m. Every reaction of hers was a scene I had predicted, directed, and captured. No script, no cuts. I wasn't just filming anymore. I was shaping. In my notebook, I called it Project Second Skin. No one knew, not even her. But it was the most personal film I had ever made. In early January, the film department opened submissions for the Brightmoor Student Shorts Festival. Open theme, 8-minute limit. I knew exactly what I wanted to show. Not everything, not yet, but enough to spark questions, discomfort, whispers. I edited a sequence of clips, Harper looking into the lens without knowing it, Harper sleeping as the hallway lights flickered, Harper crying in the corner of our room while distorted audio played in the background. I titled it Still Life, Frozen Art, Frozen Girl. While exporting the final cut, I felt something strange in my chest. Not guilt, not fear. It was more like elegant emptiness. Maybe that's what real filmmakers feel before a premiere. Brightmoor didn't ask questions. They said Harper had withdrawn from the semester, that she needed some time away. My short was screened at a state-level festival. I gave interviews to student blogs, talked about creative process, about invisible narratives and the ethics of documentary filmmaking. Months later, I saw Harper from across a cafe near campus. Her hair was tied back, she wore looser clothes, she looked smaller. She was with another girl, laughing at something on her phone but not showing her teeth. When she saw me, she froze. For 2 full seconds, our eyes met, and there was no hatred, no fear, only recognition, as if she had finally figured out the name of the role she played. I raised my camera instinctively, but I didn't press record. In that moment, there was no film left, only echo. Because in the end, she erased herself. That's what happens when you mistake intimacy for trust.
Room 3B always had that muffled sound of something no one wants to remember, as if the walls were painted not to brighten the whiteboard, but to cover up an old mistake. Today, it's even quieter than usual. The chairs are lined up the same, but something in the air feels off. I arrived 5 minutes early, like always, opened my folder, reviewed the material, aligned the papers on the desk. It was the final session before the exam, and Ellie didn't show up. I noticed Ellie Monroe in the second week of the semester when she showed up late to one of my calculus tutoring sessions. She held her binder close to her chest like a shield, her hair pulled back in a rush, and her eyes red from crying or maybe just knowing when to look tired. I apologized for having started already, even though I hadn't. She gave me a tight, automatic smile, the kind people wear when they've learned to survive by pleasing others. She sat in the front, pulled out a broken pencil, and said nothing. I watched her, the way she avoided eye contact, the way she whispered sorry every time she didn't understand, the way professors treated her with extra patience, the way classmates made room for her in group work. She carried an aura that demanded protection. That's when I understood. She was the kind of student who earned emotional credit for appearing fragile. The system favored her not for brilliance, but for effort, for endurance. I knew her type, and it disgusted me. But with Ellie, there was something else. It wasn't just contempt. It was a kind of curiosity. I wanted to see how far that shell would hold before it cracked. I didn't want to help her. I wanted to watch her fall apart, and I wanted to be there when it happened.
By week 4, I started adjusting how I explained things. Nothing obvious. I used unnecessary technical terms, skipped steps in basic problems, or pretended not to understand her questions right away. When she hesitated, I'd smile and say, "You know this, Ellie. You're just unsure." Slowly, she started checking everything with me, even things beyond our sessions. I became her anchor, and she didn't even realize she was sinking. The more uncertain she felt, the more she depended on my approval. I started watching her in the library, usually after physics around 7. She sat near the back, close to the linear algebra section, earbuds in her lap, shoulders tense. The first time I saw her there, I acted surprised, said I was grabbing a book I didn't need. She smiled, that same nervous smile, and asked if I had time for a quick question. That became a pattern. Every time I happened to show up, she'd ask for help. What she didn't know was I wasn't helping her. I was studying her, learning her patterns, when she gave up, when she pressed through, when she silently cried. I was learning fast. I began inserting little corrections she didn't need. "You copied this wrong again," I'd say, even when it was right. Sometimes I'd let the silence hang for a bit too long, until I saw her face twitch with doubt. Then she'd ask, "Did I mess it up again?" I'd nod slowly, with the kind of tone teachers use when they've already given up. Not a mistake, just careless. She'd write it all down, even the things that made no sense. She started apologizing just for existing, and every time she stumbled through a simple concept, I'd hand her the solution like a lifeline, like I was the only one who could pull her back from her own mind. By late November, she showed up with deeper circles under her eyes. Her fingers were smudged with graphite, like she'd been copying formulas for hours. When I told her something was wrong, she didn't even question it anymore. Just nodded, rewrote it, and whispered, "Sorry." I could see her posture collapsing week after week. On the rare days she got everything right, I threw in a surprise problem, off syllabus, and said, "This is more like what you'll actually see on the test." Her eyes would widen, she'd grip her pen tighter, and start over. It was almost elegant how she reorganized herself around my voice, like I was the last stable thing in her universe. By late November, something shifted. She still came to sessions, but there was a delay behind her eyes, as if she was listening to me, but also watching me. Her notes got cleaner, more structured. Sometimes, when I corrected her, she'd say, "My professor explained it differently in class." It wasn't the correction that bothered me. It was the challenge inside the sentence, like she was testing the edges of my control. Or worse, like she knew it was there. In our next session, I spoke faster than usual. I nitpicked things that were clearly right. When she nailed an equation, I muttered, "Got lucky." It wasn't a mistake, it was a message, a push. I wanted her to flinch, to apologize, to break rhythm. But she didn't. She just kept writing, calm, almost like she'd been waiting for it. When the session ended, she lingered a moment, eyes on the board. Then she packed up with quiet precision, clicked her pencil case shut, and said, without looking at me, "I don't think I'll need next week's session." The words landed sharp and dry. Internally, it felt like she'd yanked a wire straight through my gut, thin but impossible to ignore. I didn't show it. I smiled, polite. I said, "Of course, but if you change your mind..." She nodded, still not looking at me, and left. The door clicking shut was louder than it should have been. And in that second, for the first time, I realized she wasn't retreating. She was closing the chapter. The next Friday, I arrived 15 minutes early to room 3B. The desk was clean, blue marker uncapped, ready. I wrote 3 half-finished equations on the board. Bait. Printed a worksheet full of tricks only I could navigate. Everything was set. I expected her to walk in, hesitant, struggle through the first problem, spiral, and then finally look up at me, silently asking for help. That would be the final beat, the collapse she wouldn't see coming, and I would be there to witness it. But she never came. The only thing that moved in that room was the low hum of the overhead light. 10 minutes,
15, 20. When I finally got up to erase the board, I saw the envelope on the second chair, my name typed on the front. I opened it right there. Letterhead from the Office of Academic Integrity. 3-page report. Signed by Ellie Monroe. Transcriptions of things I'd said. Dates. Copies of emails. Session logs. Attached statements from other students I'd tutored. I read each line slowly, not from fatigue, but disbelief. She had dismantled me, piece by piece, and she didn't even need to be there to do it. At the end of the report, she didn't ask for punishment. She requested a review of conduct protocols between tutors and scholarship students. It was sharp, clean, surgical. I sat down again, report in hand, and feeling the walls shrink around me. Outside, the hallway was still empty, but somehow I knew everyone would know. In the days that followed, no one said anything. No professors asked questions, no students confronted me. But the energy changed. Admiration turned into caution. Questions dried up. I wasn't fired, but something in me stopped speaking, and that silence hurt more than any formal punishment ever could. Some absences make more noise than presence. Since that morning in room 3B, I haven't seen Ellie again, but her presence lingers in spaces. Sometimes I hear footsteps down the hall and think it's her, not out of fear, but some strange form of unfinished business. Like maybe I still owe her something. No one formally removed me. I still tutor occasionally, but less often, and when I do, it's with gloves. Voices careful, eyes neutral, like they're handling glass or poison. The other day I passed a group of students near the dining hall. One asked about tutoring. They didn't say her name. They didn't say mine. But there was a pause, a gap. It's hard to explain what it feels like to lose authority without losing your job. Harder still to accept that it was deserved. What Ellie did wasn't a complaint. It was a mirror, a reflection of what I become when no one's watching, and what she had to become to survive what I tried to do. She didn't scream, didn't expose, didn't confront. She understood. And that understanding, quiet, exacting, is what broke me. Maybe that's the real lesson. And now, I'm the one who doesn't want to be seen.
If these stories made you uncomfortable, then they did exactly what they were meant to. Like the video, share it with someone who's not afraid to face the darker sides of the human mind. And tell me in the comments, which one kept echoing in your head even after the screen went black? Because sometimes it's not the scream, not the weapon, not the shadow that lingers. Sometimes all it takes is one wrong turn.